All right, I want to talk about one other thing. The rise of the 49ers. Have you guys been watching the AMC show, The Rise of the 49ers? I'm a little late to it. I've watched the first 3 episodes. I'm midway through the 4th. But I think the most important, the most interesting stuff was the first 3. That's the Bill Walsh stuff. 77, really, to 88. And I find this interesting because I was born in 88. And the first season I really remember all the way through was 94. I remember them losing to the Eagles. I remember Steve Young yelling at Seifert. Seifert not acknowledging him. I was in Santa Cruz. My brother had just gotten into college. We were down on the boardwalk. I remember looking up at the TV and seeing 40-8, thinking, what the hell is going on? The Niners, it doesn't happen to the Niners. I remember the whole season. Remember them beating. Anyway, good times. What I don't remember is the 80s. So it was wonderful to watch it. I think it's hilarious that the whole thing is produced by Tom Brady and he talks about it. He keeps saying we. Dude, you're a part owner of the Raiders, man. Stop. Anyway, what's interesting to me about this is I didn't understand what happened with the quarterback controversy in 87 and 88. I didn't understand that Bill Walsh traded for Steve Young and was really trying to replace Joe Montana as early as 1987. And he called it a quarterback controversy himself. And he was rotating quarterbacks in the same drive. He was starting Steve Young in games. And the team was like, what? The coaching staff was like, what? So you think like, man, they got rid of Bill Walsh after 10 years? After he won a Super Bowl? How crazy were they? Well, after watching this show, I'm like, Bill Walsh needed to go. Hey, God love you for building all of this. All-time great coach. Maybe the greatest ever. But there's something about that 10-year sell-by date, and he needed to go because it seemed to me could have done 2 things. You trade for Steve Young, great trade. All-time, maybe the greatest trade ever, right? And you needed him because Joe was in and out. He had back issues. He was missing games. You either trade for Steve and make him your starting quarterback, but you can't do that because Steve in 87, 88, 89, and 90 was not better than Joe Montana. Even though Walsh thought he might be, wanted him to be. So you put you courageously do what no one else in the world would do and move on from Joe and make Steve the starter. Or you tell Steve, hey, man, you're under contract and I don't care how you feel. You're the backup. Wait. And you might be waiting 3 years. But it seemed like Bill tried to take option C, which was like juggle them, play them both. And that's what surprised me. I realized if I was covering this team in the 80s, I would have been really hard on Bill Walsh. I would have said, you know what? They need a new head coach. Because it seemed to me like what happened, they won in 81, they won in 84. They're now legends for life, 2-time Super Bowl champions and a dynasty. But then 85, 86, 87, they have these horrendous, horrifying, embarrassing defeats in the first round of the playoffs where they scored like 3 points. And Bill Walsh, you think of him as being the greatest coach ever. He's just like every other coach, man. It was either going to be on him or on Joe. You lost. You scored 3 points. And it seemed like he wanted to put it on Joe. It was his fault. Well, he couldn't stay healthy or he was this and that. Like maybe we need a quarterback. Maybe this guy's just a product of my system. Maybe we need a guy who transcends the system. Steve can run. Steve can do so much more. But ultimately, the Niners chose Joe over Walsh. And that was the right call because Joe wasn't done. He went on to have a great season in 88 and 90. And then he got hurt, and then it was Steve's time. So Walsh was like 3 or 4 years too early. And like it seemed like the whole team knew it. They were 6-5 in 88 because he was messing around with the quarterback position. Finally, he locked in on Montana. They went on a run. They got to the Super Bowl. They had like 13 points against the Bengals. I mean, not exactly a freaking clinic. Then they have the one famous drive at the end where you saw John Candy and it was great. The next year, they're freaking 14 without Bill Walsh. They're way better. 14-2. Brent Jones has a great year. John Taylor has a great year. But Joe Montana, MVP. Super Bowl, score 55 points. Like, what was all that? Why was it so hard from 85 to 87? You had Jerry Rice. What the hell is going I just think it's interesting. Like the narrative is that Bill Walsh is the greatest. He did nothing wrong. No, it was time for him to go. Moving on, switching from him to Seifert at that time was the right call. Maybe they would have been better if they had switched from him to Holmgren. I don't know. They got to keep both, at least for a few years. So that really surprised me. I would have been calling for Bill Walsh's head in 1988. And so was Eddie. Eddie agreed. Other thing that was interesting about it was when they were talking about those seasons in 85, 86, 87, Keena Turner, who else was I? They would be like, after we failed in 85, Randy Cross, after we failed in 86, that's how that team thought of not winning the Super Bowl. 85 was a failure. 87 was a failure. Yeah. What happened in 87? Doesn't matter. Didn't win the Super Bowl. That's all I got to know. Failure. It'd be nice if the Niners held themselves to that standard, but I guess you can do that once you've already won 2. Then you actually know what the standard is that you have to hold yourself to. I mean, if you haven't won any and you lose them, I mean, what do you know about a standard? And then the last thing I want to say about the rise of the Niners, and it so annoys me. It's educational, but it does annoy me that, like, my dad's not in it at all. Ira's not in it at all. And you know who isn't in it at all? George Seifert. How do you not even mention him? Now, they get to him in the 4th episode where they, like, go quickly through the 90s. Very fast. And it's like, okay, and then Walsh was gone, and then George Seifert was a head coach. It's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Who's George Seifert? You haven't told me who George Seifert is. You haven't mentioned him in 3 episodes. He didn't exist. Which pisses me off. I'm sorry. Did the Niners not have a great defense in every freaking Super Bowl that they won? Was he not the coach of the defense? Did he not develop Ronnie Lott? What are we talking about? And that's what kind of annoyed me too about I guess about Bill Walsh's legacy. So much of Bill Walsh's legacy is him taking all the credit for everything. What about Seifert? And that's why Seifert's not in the Hall of Fame. Because everyone gives the credit to freaking Walsh. Well, he inherited Walsh's team. What the hell was Walsh doing with it? He was messing it up for half a decade. He finally got out of Joe Montana's way. Joe Montana won a Super Bowl. They let Walsh go, and they were better without him. You didn't even – Seifert's still alive. How was he not in the show? You didn't mention him. There should have been a 20-minute chapter about George Seifert from San Francisco. Who is he? How did Walsh discover him? How important he was to the whole operation? Nothing. That makes me feel like, man, it's still propaganda. Bill Walsh has passed away 20 years ago. Can we tell the truth? He's still the greatest. Can we tell the truth? No Seifert in the rise of the Niners? Yeah, sure. And I think one of the reasons Walsh had to go was because he was doing everything. He was the emperor of the team, kind of like Kyle. And then he left, and you had a head coach focusing on being a head coach, and an offensive coordinator focusing on being an offensive coordinator, and a GM focusing on being a GM. And usually that's a better setup than give the whole team to one person. Because with Walsh, it's like, yeah, he's the greatest coach of all time. And when he's on, he's on. But when he's off, the whole team's screwed. When he's off, you score 3 points in a playoff game. With Joe Montana and Jerry Rice on your team. When he's off. But when you have a whole team, Holmgren and Seifert and McKittrick, and it's not all dominated by one guy who needs 100% of the credit, you might even be better. I wasn't expecting to see that when I watched the show. I was expecting to have a further appreciation of Bill Walsh, who I didn't cover, my dad covered and wrote a book about. But he couldn't make up his mind. He didn't have the guts to do what he wanted to do, which was bench Joe permanently and make Steve the starter. That's what he wanted to do, and he didn't have the guts to do it. And he was wrong to want to do it. The guy who ultimately did it was Seifert, and he did it at the right time. Seifert was the guy who went back to Montana full time, which led to, another Super Bowl and then another NFC Championship game appearance. And then he was the guy who ultimately traded Joe Montana, which is something that clearly Bill wanted to do, was thinking about doing, flirted with doing. I mean, I had Tom Walsh on my show all year. He even told you, he's like, Bill sent cut-ups of Joe to the Raiders. Was trying to trade him to the Raiders. And Tom and Al were watching. They're like, Bill, he's great. He's great. It just doesn't fit our. They didn't want him. They're like, hey, but is Steve Young available though? Also, Steve Young's like my hero because I met him when I was 7 years old. Doesn't he come across as kind of a diva? Like you get traded to the Niners and you're like, he's very much like, well, what am I going to play? Bill said I was going to play. What am I going to play? Like, hey man, Joe Montana is better than you. Maybe one day he won't be, but like, you know it. Everyone on the team knows it. Bill might not know it, but Joe knows it. Like, it was kind of interesting to see him because he was so rich coming from the USFL. He had this like incredible haircut and he was so well dressed and he just had this little attitude like, wasting my time. It's like, damn, Steve. Yeah, you're one of the 10 greatest quarterbacks of all time, but you're not Joe. Sorry, Steve. So interesting show. I guess I'd recommend it if you're older than me and you lived through it. You probably don't need to watch it, but I didn't know these things. And I covered this team I should probably know the truth about the 80s and about the 80s, really. So go watch it. Tell me what you think. It annoys me that Tom Brady is the guy. He is gotta be the biggest narcissist I've ever seen in the world. Everything is about him. He makes everything about him. I can't stand listening to him do shows because every play it's like, man, this reminds me of this one time with me and Wes Welker in 2011. It's like, no. Tell me about them, not about you. Tell me about them, not about you. All day, every day, Kim says, I think the thought is up for top quarterbacks. Patty, Lamar, Josh, Joe, Matt, is build a strong offense. And if they get shootouts, we have the guy to do it. What's the point of spending $55 million a year on a quarterback if defense dominates in the NFL? Maybe you should spend that money on defensive tackles, linebackers, safeties, a cornerback, and then just have a quarterback like Sam Darnold or Mac Jones who won't mess it up and manage the game. If they're going to play too high all day and force you to check it down, like what are you spending? What are you asking that quarterback to do? You won't let him call audibles. You won't let him go hurry up. You're just asking him to pick one of the two plays. Load up on defense and get a cheap quarterback if that's all you're going to do. If you really have Drew Brees, prime Peyton Manning, by all freaking means, but those guys don't exist anymore. Joseph For Real says culture is political. Only the greatest leaders have the equanimity of Andy Reid. Hopefully Steve Young's sass enter Mac like Space Jam. Trading Mac Jones would be such a mistake. I don't know if that's what you're talking about. I never really know what Joseph For Real's talking about, but I like him. He's talking about something I respect that. You had a quarterback in Sam Darnold. You didn't even consider him. Have you noticed that when Sam Darnold talks about his turnaround, like he'll credit pretty much everyone except Kyle Shanahan? He'll talk a lot about Brock Purdy. He'll talk a lot about Kevin O'Connell. I don't hear him mention Kyle. Maybe I'm wrong. You guys could fact check me on that one. But I kind of get the feeling that like Sam appreciates his time here, but also feels like Kyle never considered him. Never really gave him a serious consideration as anything more than a backup or a reclamation or like a backup. So he ended up being just as good as your guy for cheaper, more durable, stronger arm, and champion. Don't give Mac Jones away. He's exactly what teams are looking for. The experienced, affordable quarterback. It's Mac Jones. It's not Brock Purdy. Experienced, affordable, good, not overpaid. Sam Darnold's a lot of things, but he's not overpaid. Brock Purdy is overpaid. So he might be better than Sam. But I think it's very important in today's NFL. Can you really win a Super Bowl with a quarterback who's overpaid? I don't think you can. You could point to the Eagles, but again, look at Hurts' cap number that year was very low. Then look at it this last year. Look what happened to that team. I don't think you can win a Super Bowl with an overpaid quarterback.